Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. It's Isaac here. I will just wait a few more minutes for everybody else to join and we'll get started. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm just going to wait another minute or so, just to give people another chance just to join us. And then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us. Just another 30 seconds, I think, as we still see people joining us, and then we'll get going. Brilliant. Thanks for your patience, and thanks everyone for joining us. My name's Isaac. I'm an account manager at Solibri. Thanks for joining our new workshop series. I'm hosted with my colleague Ken. So it's the two of us here today. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. If you have any problems, just drop them in the chat window below for us so that we can see those. But the first presentation of today's session is just going to be a little introduction to what this is all about, really. So let's get started. By the way, if you have any questions as well, just drop them in the question box as we go. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, and Ken will introduce himself just as a part of his part of the webinar too. So without further ado, so today's agenda, today's workshop series, this new initiative that we're taking here in the UK and Ireland is to introduce you really to what your survey feedback has been for us. So recently we've put out a series of questions to our user base and said, basically, what do you want to learn? What do you want to know more about when it comes to Solibri? And we're going to review that today. We're going to do a bit of a summary as to what the outcomes were. We're then going to do a very quick introduction recap session on the Solibri workflow. But then all these webinars that we're planning on doing within this series is really education on demand. We're not setting the agenda ourselves. We're listening to you, what you want to see, what you want to learn. And that's exactly what we're going to showcase back to you. So then I'll talk a little bit about what we're scheduling and moving forwards. So a little introduction. As I said, it's designed to help you get the most out of your solutions. Everything that we showcase is really just tailored. All the agendas that we're going to do with these webinars is just tailored to what you want to see. We're going to share the results of surveys as we go. So the more of you that submit survey feedback to us, the more naturally tailored these are going to be, and the more that we can adjust accordingly for whether we want to go more in depth on certain subjects. I maybe draw it back a little bit and say, yeah, let's go a little bit more top level. But so using your guidance as we go, really. We're going to prepare every single session really just, again, to educate you based on those most common areas. And then all sessions are recorded, and we're going to share every single live recording with you at the end of every session as well, within 24 hours. It's another opportunity just to ask questions to us. I've got Ken here, as I said before, our technical guy, so he's more than happy to help me answer and coordinate some of your questions. So without further ado, let's look at the latest survey feedback from everybody. So I'm just going to move this window off my screen so I can see everything here. But in a summary, these are all the questions that went out. So thank you to all of those that have submitted your feedback already. It's really good to have. We're going to leave that survey open. So if anybody after this session wants to submit their requirements and the things they want to learn about, please feel free to do so. But as you can see, the top result was how to make information takeoffs, how to make ITOs. So really that's what we're basing the next session on. The first session today is an introduction. The second session, which I'll get into a little bit later in terms of when it's going to be, is going to be information takeoffs based on popular demand. So what's it going to cover? It's going to be an introduction to them. We can talk a little bit about what the prerequisites are for making sure we can utilize information takeoffs, the tools, toolkit in Solibri effectively. We're going to look at the workflow behind this functionality. If there's other areas of Solibri that draw into play to accommodate this. Naturally, there's going to be a Q&A session at the end of that session as well. And again, just all sessions are going to be recorded for everybody. We will then re-survey everything and just say to you again, look, was this in depth enough? Would you want more information on this? Just so that we can make sure that our webinars really are hitting the mark. But we're not going to forget about everything else. So all of these other things that you've mentioned, they're still going to be catered for. They're just going to be catered for in the order of importance. So naturally, the second session might well be component classifications. If that changed, there will be dynamic, and we'll do the next best thing that you want to see. But naturally, we've then got model checking in there. We've got defining rule requirements, model revision comparison as another rule, how to report on issues. So communication is obviously a big one as well. How to federate models, some simple functionality as well as we move our way forwards. So one of the other parts of the survey that we put out recently was, what do you want to learn more about in real detail? So getting certified on, really getting into the kind of nitty gritty behind some of this functionality. And the top resulting areas, of course, was Solibri Office, whether it's the advanced or the Office basics, the fundamentals. So those training courses that we've got coming up already, they do differentiate themselves from what we're doing in this workshop series. So as I said, they're a little bit more in depth. They go through from the basics right to the advanced functionality. They're there to help you learn the workflow and see the benefits in much greater detail. And naturally, that's going to give you the confidence and the familiarity across the broad spectrum of these products. So taking these two into consideration, naturally, we're talking about harnessing the power of BIM. Won't get into too much detail on the objectives you can see there, but we're running some at the moment. So if those of you that didn't know, it's a little bit late now because Tuesday was yesterday. The second part of the fundamentals for Office is coming up tomorrow, but we are doing an advanced workshop in May. You're still welcome to try and join that if you wanted to. We are going to plan more for Q3 as well. And this is a kind of just an agenda so you can get a familiarity of exactly what these cover. So if you want to go back over this recording, then you're welcome to. If you want to message me and say, what are the real benefits of this and what do we get out of it, then just let me know and we can go into detail. But it's a slightly different kind of kettle of fish. So just looking at Solibri Office, today's session is just to really introduce you again and just recap on the agenda of Solibri Office. So taking our IFCs, we're going to import them into Solibri. We've now got our Solibri project. Within there, we're going to visualize it, the model. We're going to navigate our way through the model. We can then federate and bring in other IFCs if we wanted to. Naturally, you've got your coordination functionality. We can use classifications for how we visualize and look at data, whether it's spaces or components themselves. It helps to identify things naturally. Then we're going to check, and this is one of the core benefits of Solibri, is the checking functionality, whether we're doing really definitive checking rules. We're identifying problems, whether we're revising and looking at the model revisions as we go through our project. But really what we're doing is we're looking for real and potential issues, and we're basing the results of those issues on severity, which is one of the parameters naturally you can define in your rules. And that's the kind of encapsulated picture of the core functionality at the early days of Solibri. When we get into communicating them, so we're now going out to those that want to make the changes, those are responsible for fixing the problems. We're going to talk a little bit about BCF. We've got API integrations with issue tracking systems now, so we can talk a little bit about that later on, but really how we communicate problems and how we share them. And really, at this point, you know, we're now validating our information. We've got Solibri workflow nice and ironed out on screen. And it's at this point where we can trust the information, it's fit for purpose, and then we can deliver things like Kobe, we can do takeoffs, and of course, we can trust that it's reliable, and we have quality assured models as we work our way through the project. So it's a big summary of Solibri Office, and these workshop series is defined to break into some of this stuff in greater detail. So without further ado, just another kind of introductory demonstration from a technical side. I'll pass over to Ken, and then when Ken's finished his demonstration, we'll jump back to my presentation and we'll naturally do a Q&A session at the end.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. I'm Ken, and I'm going to run through this quick demo. Just before we launch into that, a couple of little bits on the kind of interactive side, because it's this bit you might now be able to think of some questions and things. So if you've got anything that you want to ask question-wise, you can use the question panel that's part of the GoToWebinar panel. But as the screen's shifting over, Isaac, can you launch the poll about who's used Solibri, pretty please? You can be my digital assistant. Who needs Alexa?
Absolutely. What version of Solibri?
Sorry, because I mentioned the A word, Alexa heard me.
Always. Which version of Solibri do you use? Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. I've just launched that now, so if you
there we go.
Hopefully you can see that on screen.
So this is just to get an idea of what version you use or how much you use it type thing. I'm going to be awkward. So I'm signed in on a separate machine so I can keep an eye on things. So I'm going to be awkward and I've ticked other. So just give that, well, you'll be able to see how long that's going to run, but give it another 10 seconds or so, and then we can share the results.
Yeah, no problem. A few more seconds, you're still seeing results there. Fantastic. Okay, thank you everybody. I'm just going to close this poll down and I can share the results on screen so we can have a little look. So we're going to do these as we work our way through as well. So any poll questions that we ask related to the sessions that we're running, I'll share the results on screen so you can see them. So good to see.
Cool. Okay, so over half are in Office. Good stuff. Okay. If you want to switch the screen, so I'm the presenter, and
Happily.
I will run through things here. And if there's anything that I'm doing that there's another poll would be appropriate, then feel free just to shout loud and stick it on screen.
Great, thank you.
There we go. So my screen should be coming on now. There we go. So what I've got here is just Solibri at the very start up. I've already put in my username and password and got this dialogue here. And one of the things that I always do is encourage people when they're using Solibri is to leave this dialogue open so that when you launch the software, you can choose the most appropriate version. So typically you would have Office or Anywhere or Site or Anywhere. And what this allows you to do is choose whether you use a license or not. And it means that the free license, if you're not using it, means somebody else can be using it for whatever purposes. So today we're talking Office, so let's just go into Office. And what I've got is a pretty much clean install. There's only one little thing I haven't rolled back, which is the compact layout, because I like to reduce the size of the layout bar and reduce some of these margins and other bits and pieces. So let's start at the beginning. This is Solibri, fresh out the box. I have a list of recent models and things in here. first thing we always do when we come into Solibri is pick a role. So roles are a really crucial part of how Solibri works. They give us access to the tools we're going to use on a project that we're about to run. So we have a number of roles in here. You'll see there's some that I've already created with really imaginative names like ABC and XYZ. And then obviously ran out of ideas, so started going in reverse. But what we can do is we can pick if our interest was structural. If we were to open that, then what you'll see is that the rule sets that load the classifications and the ITOs are all based around the structural side of things. If it was more of a generalistic approach and we had a federated model, we might just be looking at BIM coordination, in which case we have a mix of structural, MEP, architectural, and we have different coloured stars here just to represent the, in this case, rule sets that will load by default. The other ones are available as well to bring in as a backup and be loaded extra by end users if that's a requirement. Today, the model I'm going to be working with is probably familiar to you all if you've seen Solibri before. It's the same model we've had for approximately 1,000 years. But it's the same building because we need to be able to predict how it's going to work. So for that, I'm going to use this BIM validation architectural, this BIM validation architectural role with these rule sets, classifications, and information takeoffs. As you become more used to Solibri and you deploy it across your office, and I don't know how long you've all been using Solibri, but as you develop your use of it, the role will change and adapt and update, and you might develop more ones that are more specific sets of tools for particular tasks. In this case here, what I'm going to do is just go and bring in a couple of additional classifications that I can use throughout the demo. So we'll bring those in as well, and maybe what we'll do is go and just add an additional information takeoff definition. So these are the resources. This is where they're sitting, in this case locally in Windows, but ideally they would be sitting somewhere on a server rather than on this local machine. So let's go and grab, what have we got? We've got building element quantities. Let's have structural quantities as well, just for the sake of it. So we can bring those in. If I decide something like federated model alignment, that is a really pretty crucial classification. I want to have that every time. I give it a gold star. And all I'll do is I'll just save those changes, regret that later on because I've now changed the default and have to change that back when I go to do training, but never mind. So all I'm going to do now is go to my recent list, and recent shows the last 25 models or the last 25 folders that I've accessed that had models in them, and it makes it really easy to go grab those top 3. Those are the ones we're going to bring together and federate. And these right now are IFC files. When we bring them in and save them, they'll be converted to an SMC format, which is our container as such that contains the model information, the resources, the rule sets, the classifications, the ITOs, all of that fun stuff. So all I'm going to do is open that. While that loads, it's going to do a little bit of processing down here. It's then going to be presented with a dialog because what we're doing is creating this federated model that consists of 3 separate disciplines coming together, and we can give them a short name. So we'll just have ARC for architectural, ventilation, we'll just put Vint, and structural, we'll give it Stru. And we will just change the discipline here to ventilation. So this discipline is set automatically. This is the list that's available in Solibri. It doesn't change, we can't add to it. We can use classifications if we need more definition of what's in there. But this list is actually picked from a table that sits in the background behind Solibri that reads the header of the IFC file, looks to whatever the authoring tool is, and then makes a decision, is this architectural, is this ventilation, or is this structural? The downside of that is, and giving my age away now, but in the old days, not that long ago, there was Revit structures, Revit MEP, and Revit architecture. Since a reasonable while ago, there has just been Revit, and it's one product. So it means all files, when they generate from Revit as IFC, the header just says they're created inside Revit, and we have to make a jump. Are they going to be architectural? Are they going to be structural? Or are they going to be MEP? So it tends to be we have more architectural models than anything else, so that's the check. So here we just do a quick check to make sure these are what we expect them to be. Once I OK that, I'm then presented with the default view that we see, the default layout that we see when we open Solibri. So I can see my building, very nice that it is. I can see this thing called the model tree, and I can see this thing called info. So the model tree allows us to explore the structure of our Solibri model, and within that we can see the structure of these, in this case, IFC files. So if I was to go into Solibri building, this is the architecture model, it has a site, it has a building, and then within that it has a number of floors. And when we go into those, we can then see the components that are in those floors. So it makes it very easy to say, go and give me all the walls on the ground floor. There's all my walls. If I want to see the slabs on the first floor, there it is, very exciting. If I want to see all the doors, then we can grab those and we can highlight all the doors. So this, right now, this hierarchy is based on the actual model. So it's very much based on the containment of the model, the site, the building, the floor, and then the component. However, there's times if I want to just grab all of the walls, I want to just go to the component hierarchy, give me the walls, hit set, and there's all the walls inside the building. However, it's all the structural walls and it's all the architectural walls, and it's all walls together. Once you actually spend some time with the model, you then get to know the wall types, which is this next drop down, and that allows me to then go and say, well, actually, give me all the external walls. And there's all my external walls. Or give me all my internal walls, like so. And then once you really get into it and get to know it, then there's all my load bearing walls, and the rest are partition walls. So there's various ways we can go about this, and we can explore it based on layers, based on the components, based on the containment hierarchy, or we can just do it based on federated floors, which means rather than just ground floor of one building or one model, then this is every single ground floor component in the entire building. So the structural walls are a little bit different. There's an odd structure in there, but never mind. So let's just go back, reset this. While I'm working, we can spin, we can pan and zoom just with the regular mouse wheel, but we can look around the building. We can also click on things, paint them a nice bright green colour, and then we can read the information about that particular component. So that happens to be a wall. I've got all this ID information. We can have a look at the locations. Actually, if I look at ID, you'll see that if we scroll down here, we can see that it is an IFC entity of IFC wall standard case. Its type is IFC wall type. Here's its good. Here's its BAT ID. These are important little terms to know about and talk about, because these allow us to identify these unique components. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is going back to the graph that Isaac had put on screen, where you saw the progression from left to right. We start with an IFC file, we end up with a fresh IFC file, but in that process we go through federating, coordinating, checking, going through the checking process, reporting issues, communicating those, sending them out to whoever it happens to be, preferably with BCF, so that the models can be fixed, and then ultimately what we get is a fixed, revised model at the back end of it. So there's a whole load of information that we need to be able to see in here, but we can zoom and pan, we can click, we can find out all sorts of information, we can grab location details, quantities, materials, relations. This becomes really important to identify where things are within the building, and there's a whole host of different things we can do there. So I don't want to spend too long on here. Only other thing is I want to just do a quick section through the building, just to check that things like the MEP components are where I would expect them to be, which is towards the ceiling. Not necessarily exactly right, but they're in roughly the right place. We can use something called classifications, and classifications allow me to change the visualization of the model. So if I pick on my federated model alignment, what that does is recolor the model so that the parts in here, if we just check classified ventilation is there. So if we do that, there it's done a refresh now. We can see very clearly the different colours. So red and blue, red is architectural, blue is structural. So what we should be able to see is things like here, for example, the blue structural wall has an opening in it so that the architectural window and door, whatever it is, fits in it. Whereas up here, actually, we can see there's a problem because we can see parts of a window frame, but there's a structural wall inside it. So even just at a very, very basic early stage like this, we can identify issues, report them, and then have them fixed further down the line. So I don't want to spend too long on that. So here we're just bringing the model together, doing some very, very basic checks just to have a run around and check things are where we expect them to be. Mainly what I'm looking for here is to check that the models actually align themselves correctly. And there's further tools that we can go into. We don't have time here, but we can check physical locations of components, check origins, and make sure things marry up where they should be. Most important button for now is a good old show all, because that puts everything back to where we expect it to be, standard colors, and then off we go, we're set to go and do what we need to do. So the next part of the process is once we've brought the model together and once we've sorted it and we've done whatever we need to do to make sure the classifications are loaded that we need, we're going to go into checking. So classifications are a way of filtering information as well as visually changing the model. We can filter information, and actually, if I go back just quickly, it enables us to do things like in this building elements general, we're able to pick out very easily, there's the load bearing walls. So I did identify them, but it was through several clicks. Here it's just one click, partition walls, load bearing walls, and external walls. And then things like external doors, or maybe we need to use internal doors for some sort of checking between spaces or fire compliance or whatever it happens to be. But our classifications allow us to very, very easily identify these components. So if I go to checking again, this has already loaded the 3 rule sets that were part of the role that I picked because I knew in advance I was going to be doing this type of check on here. So without further ado, if I just click the check button, it goes and processes. It'll use, in this case, this machine's an i9, so it's got plenty of resource. So it uses 3 of the threads to simultaneously process those. And before I've even finished, it's finished. So at this stage it's fairly quick, but we have a model that's designed for this. So in your own models, depending on the number of rules you have, the complexity of the model, the amount of detail in the model, and the number of checks that have to be done, it could take a good while longer. Ultimately, what we get though at the end of this is some sort of colourful set of triangles. So red is the most severe issues, the severe priority. We then have the severity, high severity, moderate severity, and low severity. And then we've got one here which, based on the rule, is automatically decided that fails. It is an issue that there's no choice, there's no human involvement, it's a failure. So we'll come and look at that in a second. But coming back to this, what I can do is pick on each one of these and we can get an issue count. And that gives us an indication, if I select all 3, that in this model right now, we have 50 severe issues, 37 moderate, and 8 low severity issues. We can pick the individual rule sets, so BIM validation architectural, and we can see how many issues are in each one of the actual rule sets. We also have this thing, it's called an issue density, and it means I've got 20 issues per 1,000 meters cubed. The unit doesn't mean so much, but the score means something. So this is our start point, this is our reference, our scorecard, and we can report this to Excel to say that at the very start of this project, if I just put that on the desktop, at the start of this project, we have these number of things have been checked. This will list all sorts of details about the number of issues, the rejected issues, the accepted issues. It'll talk about the number of components that were passed, that were failed, that were checked, that were whatever it happens to be. So this is our start point that tells us, line in the sand, this is the quality of the model right here and now. As we then go through various iterations and revisions and updates, then these numbers should decrease. There'll always be stages where there'll be an input of information and the numbers will jump back up again, but over time they should be decreasing. So ultimately from this, I'm conscious I'm doing a lot of talking here, but we need to get through things. So ultimately from here, what we need to do is start dropping down into the various parts here to identify some issues. So the first issue we identify is this wall height issue. And if we drop down into the results and drop down to get to the actual warning triangle where we get the most detail, it tells me wall components have got the wrong value. The actual value of the height is 310. This rule is checking that all walls are more than 500 millimeters tall. So here we have a lonely little wall sitting in the middle of nowhere. We don't have any context, so we've got some tools that we can quickly put a section box around there. I already used the sectioning tool, so what we can do is grab that bottom section. We can push pull, so we can just pull that down through the floor. If we come across here, you can pull that across to the wall just behind us. You think I've seen this before, the way I knew there was a wall going to be there. But obviously, if you spend a bit of time with the model, you get to know these things. Ultimately, what I'm looking to do is get a view similar to that one there, and I want to capture the fact that we're querying this wall that's 310. But what wall? So I can right click and I can also highlight, and we can actually paint it red. And now we know what wall we're talking about. And with that done, what I'm going to do is add a slide, and a slide captures this issue. And to make it really clear, I like to do things like put red wall in the title. When it comes to description, I'm very fluent and fast at type and Finnish because we have a Finnish product here from Helsinki, but it's probably better if we keep it above board and just do everything in English and just do it that way. So what that does is capture all the information that comes from the rule itself, the various different parameters, the descriptions behind them, and it just populates the fields. And then what it can do is concentrate on the important things, like say, well, this certainly it's an issue that's open. Is it an error? Is it info? Is it a warning? Maybe it's just a warning at this stage that there's not necessarily anything wrong with the wall, but it might not be described in the best way. Depending on what BCF version we're going to use, we could then start to include things like what stage we're at, if we want to put a due date on here, so let's make it for Friday, if we want to give it a priority. There's nothing populated here yet, but if we do use some of the BCF API servers that Isaac had mentioned we've got the links to, this will automatically populate these fields from those servers, so we can get it from there. Right now, I'm just going to put a tag on it to say that it's the architectural team that need to take a look at it, so we'll stick that on there. That's captured the image. That's why I spent a little bit of time formatting this in the middle of the screen. If I don't like the angle, we can always move it around to somewhere else and we can add another version of it, because we don't have to have just the one image. So here we can see the two different images, and we can use annotation tools to draw on it and various other bits and bobs. We can add further comments. It has location information, but ultimately I'm just going to close that down and move on to the next one. So we don't have a lot of time here. I'm going to skip through and grab some of the important ones here. So I want to check not that one, sorry, deficiency detection, because I know there's a few items here that will be fixed when we do an update. So when I get to this one here, components above columns, this is a fairly significant issue where we have all of the columns on the second floor that hold up the roof don't actually touch the roof. So I'm not a structural engineer. I don't know if we have any structural engineers online, but that might be something that we have to do something about. So we'll come in here, we'll grab this, and really this time all I have to do is give it some sort of description. Columns don't touch the roof. We give it a description. That'll tell us that they're short by 450 mil. This certainly is an issue, so we're going to leave that there. Let's also put on the structural team. So these are little flags to help organize how we're going to format this and how we're going to communicate things. And that's it. So we'll close that one down. As I close, you'll see it's been given a white or a grey triangle now because I've processed it, and the decision's been made of it's rejected, so that's why it now has a cross. When we have things like OK, it means that this rule has passed, so none of the columns have any issues below them. They connect to what they should do, so that's all good. When they have a dash, it means it's not been able to evaluate them because this is an old model and it didn't actually use beams, it used bits of wall. So we don't have anything in there, which is okay. If I then come down to the general space check, there's so many different things to actually talk about and look at in here, but I'm just quickly going through things. If we look at space validation, we have a boundary issue, which it's important to highlight these sort of things because it can find even basic modeling errors like this one here. So the space in Solibri terms is the IFC space. That's the physical volume of the space that we're all occupying right now, unless anybody's outdoors. And in this case, either the walls have moved after the space was modelled or the space has been modelled completely incorrectly. In Revit, you would call these rooms. In ArchiCAD, you call them zones, but they're IFC spaces. So here we certainly have an issue that is one that needs to be reported. So we grab that. We also add a slide. We give it the various details that we need. And what normally I would do when I'm working at full resolution is actually just have this docked into the side of the screen. But I've reduced the resolution for the sake of the presentation today. So let's just put the description in and close that. And then the last one we'll take a look at is just real quick, this intersections between components. Before we get to information takeoffs, before we do any sort of reliable quantity information from Solibri, we need to do various different checks. But one of them is this one here, which is just checking intersections. So in this case, it's a wall-to-wall intersection. We might do architectural to MEP or structural to MEP or architectural to structural. We could do a whole variety of different ways of checking information. But what this is going to do here is physically check the geometry between walls and walls. So what it's looking for in particular is any walls that are hidden inside other walls or don't connect properly. So here, when we go to this, what we can actually see, if I put a selection around that area, we can see the blue wall is actually hidden fully inside the other one. And there's no way to see that. In the authoring tool, you would just see a plan view, you would see just a 3D surface. If I go back to the rest of the model in a second, you'll see. So I'm going to capture this, grab that, say it's architectural, whatever else we need to do. But if I was just to do show all, then all you see is the structural model, which doesn't help. But if we go back to here and grab purely the architectural model to the selection basket, and we hide the space, then all you see is just a white wall. But in fact, if I was to make this wall transparent, there we go. You can see there's another piece of wall actually in there, which is not meant to be there at all. If I make that one transparent as well, you can look down and you can see it. So this rule itself is our general intersection rule, which very loosely is clash detection, but it actually does a number of things. So it looks for components inside components, it looks for exact duplicates, and then it looks for items that clash, and you can configure it in a variety of different ways. So having done this, ideally what we would have done is go through it and process each one of those, but we don't even do that in a full day's training course because it takes a bit of time. But you can see quite quickly I'm able to go through those and process them, and there's other things we can do as well. There's other techniques and tools that we can talk about. But ultimately, once we've done that, we're going to do one of two things with it. We may go down the traditional communication route, which involves creating a presentation from these results, and we'll just call this bin validation. I'll just call it bin validation, it's much easier that way. And then we'll just put a prefix of BV on the front of it. And what that'll do is create, in effect, a folder that captures together all these issues that we've identified today. Now, it might be we group it by a presentation name, it might be we do it by date, it might be we do it by phase, it might be we do one for each individual rule set, because right now I've only got 4 items, but if you've got 100 items and there's 50 here, 25 there and 25 there, then you might choose to group them in a different way. But what this would allow me to do is actually go and further comment and mark up and talk about, you know, what we've actually found here. So we could go in here, we can review what's there, we can add further comments, these sort of bits and pieces. But then what we can do with it is report it out to the traditional BCF methods, which is creating a traditional format. More realistically, what we're going to be doing here is probably not PDF or RTF, because you don't have a lot of control over the appearance of them or the branding of them, but we could go through something like send it to Excel And if I was to take, I've done one already, but I'm just worried about what I've done with it. Let's take a standard one. So we'll take the detailed report and we will edit that. And once it's edited, we can then start to do things like, say, if the mouse would scroll, we could change the logo. So it's got the Solibri logo, but we could give this some sort of corporate branding if we want. So it's not the button I want to, Ken, that one and that one. I want them to be, well, let's make them stand out. So we'll make them yellow. We'll grab both of those. We'll change the font so that they're dark blue. We'll make them, they're already bold. Let's make them bigger. Let's make them in the middle, like so. So that's going to stand out. We could choose which columns we need, which ones we don't need, various other bits and pieces. But if I just save that, close it down, that's just created the default. So ideally that would be happening elsewhere, and that would just be the copy that's on the network is updated, which means when you come to write your actual report, you just go save report and choose where it goes. The template's already in the background. So when this is saved, what it'll do now is populate these 4 items into that table. So it captures all the details, the descriptions, the values, the linked, the location information across here. There'll be the details of, sorry, my mouse wheel is really scrolly, the components that are actually linked to it. So these are the GUIDs, and then that's the XYZ locations of them. We've got camera locations, we've got unique GUIDs for the individual topics themselves. So as we pass them between systems, we can update those. But ultimately, we're trying to communicate this so that it goes somewhere and actually gets fixed. The other way we can do this is we can use what's called a BCF Live Connector. And what this allows me to do is actually connect to a cloud service. So I've got an account on BIMTrack here, and I have this presentation I made earlier. It's from an old webinar, but it's the same model. And what that starts to do then is synchronize the issues that are on the cloud. So here is the same project on the cloud. So number 59, wrong value property, whatever it is, we can see it in there. We can actually go into it. It's just decided to be a little bit slow, and we can add some comments, post that, and what that's actually going to do is that's now gone. So that was item number 59. So back in Solibri, if we switch the index and find 59, then the comments, you'll see it's already got that comment has been added. So there's a live link between the two systems, and we can actually import the issues that I found from the checking results. We can bring them straight into here and push them straight to the cloud. That then synchronizes the values, so where we have slightly different terms and our labels, it's not set up entirely properly. But this is an area that we can do a session entirely on its own. There's a lot to cover in here. But what we can do is then push them straight to the cloud. And what it's doing is starting to sync. And when they're complete, then the symbol will change. Those will be updated, and they'll actually be available online to go and view if we need to. So that's our BCF Live. As I say, there's a ton of stuff in there. There's a load of different things we can look at. The other part of the process is once we've got here and we've identified issues, what we need to do with them is push them to the authoring tool so they can actually be fixed. So what you would actually get in return is once these issues have been identified, which are these 4 that I picked up here, certainly these 2 are going to be fixed. What we can do is go and update our model so we can see that round trip. So if I return to File and, go to Model, in fact, if we just choose to update this model, what we can do is say, rather than point to revision 1, point to revision 2. And if we just refresh that, what that's going to do now is update our model, and visually it doesn't look a lot different. It looks different there because of the changes that have been made. There's rules we can run in between where we can actually compare directly between 2. I can't remember if that's one of the topics, but we can see this model slightly different. If I rerun the checks, what it actually does is reprocess them. The numbers in there actually change. So if I was to go down to the wall-wall intersections, you'll see there's nothing actually listed there. It now shows as okay. So when I go to communication, or if I was to allow it to do the whole BCF live and let it update, then what we can see is that this issue here has lost its little warning triangle. And when we look at it, this BCF, this snapshot, was a snapshot in time. And now the model's been updated. The 3D window is what's actually in the model. So that's updated live. And we can see that that change has actually been made. So we're able to go and report this, mark it as superseded, do what we have to do. When we look at the columns, you see the columns now actually extend up and touch the roof where they're supposed to. So we're able to actually see these changes. We then have a process to go through to record these off and do what we have to do with them. But that's like a really rapid run through of the process of bringing in our models, checking the coordination of them in this model layout here, going through the checking process, marking out these items, identifying them, pushing them on to be communicated. And then once they've been communicated, whether it is the traditional method like this, or whether it's BCF Live, once that's been done, we then come back to do the updates, and then we start the process again. So what I should really do is look at the very top, and I know we had 50 issues to start with. We have 50, and I can't remember what that number was, but let's gloss over that one because we've actually introduced a whole load of changes on the ground floor that's actually brought more stuff in because it's an update as well as a fix. But yeah, that's pretty much the process. The only bit I hadn't touched on was the information takeoff, and it's there to extract information. So this is available in the site product as well as in the Office product. And what it allows us to do is things like grab building element quantities, for example. If I do a takeoff, that will go and list a whole variety of information in there. But the next session we're going to talk about is entirely on information takeoffs. So I wasn't planning on doing very much more than just introducing it at this stage. So we will do an entire session purely on this in 2 weeks' time. So Isaac will give you more details on that. But is there any questions before I hand back over? Or Isaac, is there anything that's come in while I was talking?
Yep, certainly are. Thanks for that, Ken. So we've got one here. Does the BCF Live connector only work with BIMTrack? I've got a couple of others, but we'll just start with that one. Okay,
so BIMTrack is one of 5 providers we work with at the moment. So there's Aconex, BIMSync, BIMTrack, BIMCollab, and Trimble Connect, and there's a couple of others in the pipeline. We've recently brought in the BCF Live connector that uses the BCF API standard, which is a fixed standard that if any of the service providers use that same standard, we can now connect to them a lot easier than it was possible in the past. So there are more providers we're in talks with. There will be more coming online literally any time and ongoing from this point forwards.
Cool, thank you. Just before I answer any more questions, I'm just going to share my screen. If you could stop sharing your screen there, Ken.
Sure.
I will just showcase the date for the next presentation as well.
And that should switch back.
Thank you. Okay, I have a window that's popped up, but hopefully I can just move that out of the way for the moment. Okay, great, there we go. So I'm just going to make my screen full again. So this is the date for the next webinar, but just if anybody wants to take a note of that, you don't have to re-register yourself. That's another thing to mention. Based on the fact that you've registered for the series, I'll re-enroll you, and if naturally if you can't make it, then we'll send out recordings, but it'd be great to see everybody there as well. I'm just getting into a couple more questions. So can we get a recording? Naturally, of course you can.